The sound of breaking glass shattered the silence of the underground parking garage. Victoria Ashford pressed her back against the cold concrete pillar, one trembling hand clutching her swollen belly, the other gripping her car keys like a weapon. 6 months pregnant and trapped between 3 men whose eyes held nothing but malice. "Please," she whispered, her voice echoing in the dim space beneath Meridian Tower. "I don't have any cash with me. My purse is in the car." The tallest one, a man with a neck tattoo and dead eyes, stepped closer. "Lady, we ain't here for your purse." His voice was low, predatory. "Word is your husband owes some very important people a very large amount of money. And when rich boys don't pay their debts," he cracked his knuckles, "well, sometimes family gets the message instead." Victoria's breath came in short gasps. Her hands instinctively moved to shield her unborn child. The baby kicked violently, as if sensing the danger pressing in from all sides. The fluorescent lights above flickered ominously, casting dancing shadows that made the 3 men look like demons emerging from hell. "My husband doesn't owe anyone anything," she managed, though her voice betrayed her fear. "You have the wrong person." If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The second man, shorter but stockier, laughed, a sound like gravel in a blender. Mrs. Victoria Ashford, wife of real estate mogul James Ashford, currently 6 months pregnant with your first child. Silver Mercedes license plate VA2847. Yeah, we got the wrong person, all right. That's when she knew. This wasn't random. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had sent these men, and they knew exactly who she was. The third man, silent until now, pulled something from his jacket. The metallic click echoed through the garage like a gunshot. "Boss says to make it look like an accident. Pregnant lady slips, falls down some stairs. Very tragic, very believable." Victoria's legs nearly gave out. This was it. In this godforsaken parking garage beneath the tower where her husband built his empire, she and their unborn child were going to die. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer she hadn't said since childhood. Then she heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoing from the shadows near the service elevator. The 3 men turned, hands moving to weapons, eyes scanning the darkness. "Garage is closed, buddy," the tall one called out. "Take the elevator back up and mind your own business." But the footsteps kept coming, steady, purposeful, unafraid. From the shadows emerged a man in a gray maintenance uniform, pushing a yellow cleaning cart. He was maybe 5'10", with calloused hands and the kind of weathered face that spoke of a hard life honestly lived. His name tag read, Miguel Santos, Night Maintenance. But it was his eyes that made Victoria's breath catch a steel gray, alert and absolutely fearless. "Ma'am," Miguel said quietly, his voice carrying a slight accent, "are you all right?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Miguel Santos had been invisible for exactly 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. He counted because invisibility was a survival skill he'd learned the hard way. In the Marine Corps, being invisible meant coming home alive. In the civilian world, being invisible meant keeping his job, making rent, and ensuring his 8-year-old daughter Sophia had everything she needed, or even if he had to go without. At 42, Miguel had perfected the art of moving through the world unnoticed. He knew which elevator routes the executives never used, which bathrooms they avoided, which floors went completely dark after 9 p.m. He understood the rhythm of Meridian Tower like a heartbeat. The rush of morning arrivals, the lull of lunch hours, the gradual exodus that left only security guards and cleaning crews to inhabit the 40-story monument to wealth and power. Tonight felt different. Miguel had been pushing his cart through the parking garage levels, emptying trash bins and mopping up oil stains, when he heard the voices. 3 men, their tones aggressive, predatory, and a woman, scared. Every instinct screamed at him to mind his own business. Keep pushing the cart, empty the bins, go home to Sophia, help her with homework, make sure she brushed her teeth before bed, stay invisible. But then he heard something that made his blood freeze. Boss says to make it look like an accident. Miguel Santos had been a Marine for 8 years before an IED in Afghanistan took out his convoy and left him with a medical discharge, a Purple Heart he never displayed, and nightmares that still woke him in cold sweats. He'd learned to fight, to assess threats, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. And right now, every nerve ending was screaming that someone was about to die. He left his cart by the service elevator and moved toward the voices, staying in the shadows, assessing the situation like he'd been trained to do. 3 men, armed, surrounding a pregnant woman. The woman was well-dressed, expensive shoes, wedding ring that caught the light. Probably someone's wife. Someone wealthy, based on the car keys in her hand and the silver Mercedes behind her. The men were professionals, not street thugs looking for a quick score, but hired muscle with a specific job to do. The way they positioned themselves, covering escape routes, the casual confidence of their body language, they'd done this before. Miguel could have called security, should have called the police. But the woman's terrified breathing and the way she cradled her belly told him there wasn't time for protocol. Sometimes you have to choose between being invisible and being human. He stepped into the light. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The 3 men turned toward him with the fluid coordination of a pack. Miguel noted the bulges under their jackets, the way their hands moved instinctively toward weapons, the quick glance the leader gave to assess whether this new arrival was a threat. They saw a middle-aged janitor in a gray uniform, someone forgettable, someone who'd backed down. They were wrong. "I said garage is closed," the tall one repeated, taking a step toward Miguel. "You didn't hear me the first time." Miguel's hands remained steady on the cart handle, but his eyes never left the 3 men. "Heard you fine, but I also heard the lady and she sounds distressed." His voice was calm, conversational, as if they were discussing the weather. "Maybe you gentlemen could step back and give her some space." The stocky one laughed. "You got balls, old man, I'll give you that. But you don't want to get involved in this. Trust me." "Actually," Miguel said, "I do." He let go of the cart. The change in his posture was subtle but unmistakable. Gone was the slouched, tired demeanor of a night shift worker. His shoulders squared, his feet shifted to a balanced stance. His hands moved to his sides in a way that suggested he knew exactly how to use them. Victoria watched from behind the pillar, her heart hammering. This maintenance manna, this stranger was putting himself between her and 3 armed thugs. She wanted to scream at him to run, to save himself, but fear had stolen her voice. "Last chance, amigo," the leader said, his hand now openly resting on the gun under his jacket. "Walk away." Miguel shook his head slowly. "Can't do that." "Why the hell not?" For a moment something flickered in Miguel's eyes. A memory, perhaps, or an old promise. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. "Because that woman is somebody's daughter, somebody's wife, and that baby she's carrying is somebody's future." He paused, his gaze never wavering. "And where I come from, you don't walk away from people who need help." The leader's hand moved toward his weapon. Miguel was already in motion. What happened next lasted maybe 15 seconds. But to Victoria, it felt like watching a carefully choreographed dance performed at lightning speed. Miguel moved like water, flowing around the first man's clumsy grab, his elbow connecting with precise force to the attacker's temple. The man dropped like a stone. The stocky one lunged forward, swinging wildly. Miguel sidestepped, caught the man's wrist, and twisted. The sickening crack of bone was followed immediately by a scream that echoed through the garage. A knee to the solar plexus ended the fight. The leader finally cleared his weapon, but Miguel was already inside his reach. A quick series of strikes, throat, wrist, knee, and the gun clattered across the concrete floor. The man staggered backward, gasping, his hands clutching his throat. Miguel didn't pursue. Instead, he calmly walked over to where the gun had skidded, picked it up, and checked the safety. "You three have about 30 seconds to get out of this garage before I decide to make some phone calls," he said conversationally. "I'm guessing your boss wouldn't be happy if the police started asking questions about failed assignments." The leader, still wheezing, managed to croak out a response. "You have no idea what you just did, old man. No idea who you're messing with." Miguel ejected the clip from the gun and pocketed it, then tossed the empty weapon back to the man. "Maybe not, but I know exactly what you were about to do, and I know it's not happening tonight." The three men limped toward the stairs, the stocky one cradling his broken wrist, all of them throwing dark looks over their shoulders. Just before they disappeared into the stairwell, the leader turned back. "This ain't over." "Yes," Miguel said quietly. "It is." When the echo of their footsteps faded, Miguel turned to Victoria, who was still pressed against the pillar, staring at him with a mixture of shock, gratitude, and disbelief. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" She shook her head, then found her voice. No. She looked down at her hands, which were still shaking. "They said my husband owes money. They were going to—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Miguel nodded. "They're gone now, but we should call the police, and you should probably call your husband." Victoria laughed, a sound caught between relief and hysteria. "My husband." She pressed a hand to her forehead. "He's in Tokyo, business trip. He doesn't even know I was working late tonight." She looked up at Miguel with eyes bright with unshed tears. "You saved our lives, my baby and me. How do I even begin to thank you?" Miguel was already moving back toward his cart, the moment of violence transforming seamlessly back into the careful invisibility of a maintenance worker. "No thanks necessary, ma'am, just doing what anyone would do." "No," Victoria said firmly. "That's not true. Anyone else would have called security and waited. You put yourself in danger for complete strangers." Miguel paused at his cart. "Like I said, you're somebody's family. That matters." He started to push the cart toward the elevator, but Victoria's voice stopped him. "Wait." She fumbled in her purse and pulled out a business card. "Victoria Ashford. My husband is James Ashford, Ashford Development. If you ever need anything at all." Miguel looked at the card but didn't take it. "I appreciate the offer, Mrs. Ashford, but I'm good. Just maybe next time you're working late, have security walk you to your car." Victoria watched him disappear into the service elevator, clutching the business card to her chest. In the sudden silence of the garage, she could hear her own heartbeat and feel her baby moving restlessly inside her. She had no idea that the quiet man in the gray uniform had just changed both their lives forever. Miguel Santos lived in a world of careful distances and calculated invisibilities. His one-bedroom apartment in Riverside Heights was clean but sparse, furnished with pieces rescued from thrift stores and estate sales. The walls were bare except for 2 photographs, one of him in dress blues standing next to his late wife Maria on their wedding day, and another of 8-year-old Sophia, grinning gap-toothed at the camera on her first day of 3rd grade. Maria had been gone for 3 years now, cancer taking her slowly despite every prayer, every treatment, every desperate bargain Miguel had tried to make with God. Sophia barely remembered her mother's voice, but she had Maria's eyes, warm brown with flecks of gold that caught the light when she laughed. Miguel worked nights because it paid better, and because it meant he could be there when Sophia got home from school. The arrangement wasn't perfect. He survived on 4 hours of sleep and too much coffee. But it meant his daughter never came home to an empty apartment. Tonight, he was running late. Miguel parked his 15-year-old Honda in the apartment complex lot and climbed the stairs to 2B, keys already in hand. Through the thin door, he could hear the television and Sophia's voice chattering away to Mrs. Chen, the elderly neighbor who watched her during Miguel's shift. "Papan," Sophia launched herself into his arms the moment he opened the door. At 8, she was all knees and elbows and boundless energy, her dark hair always escaping whatever ponytail or braid he managed each morning. "Hey, mija." Miguel lifted her easily, breathing in the familiar scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood. "How was school?" "Mrs. Patterson says I'm reading at 5th grade level," Sophia announced proudly. "And Tommy Martinez tried to copy my math homework, but I told him that was cheating and cheaters never win." Mrs. Chen, a tiny woman in her 70s who had appointed herself Sophia's surrogate grandmother, gathered her knitting. "This one did all her homework and ate every bit of dinner," she reported with satisfaction. "No television until everything was finished, just like you asked." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen." Miguel set Sophia down and reached for his wallet, but the elderly woman waved him away. "Keep your money. This one is a joy. Besides, my soap operas are better with company." After Mrs. Chen left, Miguel helped Sophia brush her teeth and get into her pajamas, a nightly routine that had become sacred to both of them. Sophia chattered about her day, about her best friend Jessica, about the boy who put gum in Maurice's hair, about the math test she had on Friday. "Papa," Sophia said as he tucked her into the small bed that dominated her corner of the living room. "Why do you look tired all the time?" Miguel smiled and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I'm not tired when I'm with you." "But your eyes look sad sometimes, even when you smile." Children saw everything Miguel had learned. All the careful masks adults wore, all the pain they thought they were hiding. Children saw right through it all. "Sometimes grown-ups have worries," he said carefully. "But my biggest worry is making sure you're happy and healthy and safe. And you are. So really, I don't have much to worry about." Sophia considered this with the seriousness that 8-year-olds brought to important matters. "If you're worried about money again, I can get a job. Jessica's big sister babysits and makes like $20. Miguel's chest tightened. "You don't need to worry about money, mija. That's my job. Your job is to be a kid and learn everything you can and be kind to people." "I am kind," Sophia protested. "I shared my lunch with Marcus today because he forgot his. That's my girl." Miguel kissed her forehead. "Sweet dreams, okay? I love you." "Love you too, Papa." After Sophia fell asleep, Miguel sat at the small kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a stack of bills. Rent, utilities, groceries, Sophia's after-school program, the payment plan for her new glasses. It all added up to more than his paycheck from Meridian Tower covered. He'd been picking up weekend shifts at a warehouse, loading trucks for 12 hours at a stretch. But it still wasn't enough. 3 months behind on rent. The notice from the apartment complex was polite but firm. Bring the account current or face eviction. Miguel had sold everything he could yaar. Maria's jewelry, his tools, even his marine dress uniform. The only things left were Sophia's belongings and the 2 photographs on the wall. He could ask his brother Carlos for help, but Carlos was struggling too, supporting his own family on a mechanic's salary. Miguel's pride had already taken enough beatings. He wouldn't add begging to the list. Tomorrow, he decided, he'd look for a third job, something he could do during Sophia's school hours, maybe cleaning offices or washing dishes. There had to be something. Miguel was about to head to bed when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hello? Is this Miguel Santos?" The voice was crisp, professional, female. Miguel's grip tightened on the phone. Had the apartment complex decided to call about the rent after all? "Yes, Mr. Santos, this is Catherine Walsh, assistant to James Ashford of Ashford Development. Mr. Ashford would like to speak with you at your earliest convenience regarding an incident in the Meridian Tower parking garage last evening." Miguel's stomach dropped. The woman, Victoria Ashford. She'd given her card to her husband, told him what happened. Now what? Was Miguel about to lose his job for getting involved in something that wasn't his business? "Mr. Santos, are you there?" "Yes, I'm here. Is there a problem?" "No problem at all, sir. Quite the opposite. Mr. Ashford simply wants to thank you personally and discuss a potential opportunity. Would tomorrow afternoon work for you?" Miguel glanced toward Sophia's sleeping form, then at the stack of bills on the table. "I work nights. I'd need to find someone to watch my daughter." "Of course. Would 10 a.m. be convenient? Mr. Ashford can meet you wherever is most comfortable for you." The billionaire wanted to come to him? Miguel looked around his sparse apartment, and the second-hand furniture, the walls that needed painting, the carpet worn thin by too many years of foot traffic. "There's a coffee shop on Riverside and 5th, he said finally. "Manny's." "Perfect. Mr. Ashford will see you there at 10 a.m. And Mr. Santos?" "Yes?" "Thank you for what you did. My employer's wife is safe because of your courage." After she hung up, Miguel sat in the dark kitchen, staring at his phone. Tomorrow he would meet one of the wealthiest men in the city, probably to be thanked politely and sent on his way. Maybe James Ashford would slip him a few $100s as a reward, the way rich people did in movies. Or maybe this was about something else entirely. Miguel had learned not to trust good luck. In his experience, when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. But as he looked at the eviction notice sitting next to Sophia's homework, he realized he was in no position to be cautious. Sometimes you had to choose between being careful and being desperate. Tomorrow he would find out which choice he'd made. Manny's coffee shop occupied a narrow slice of real estate between a laundromat and a tax preparation office, the kind of place that served strong coffee in chipped mugs and never worried about matching the furniture. Miguel had been coming here for 3 years, usually grabbing a cup before his shift, occasionally splurging on a pastry for Sophia when his paycheck allowed it. At 9:55 a.m., Miguel sat in a corner booth, wearing his best shirt, a blue button-down he'd bought for Maria's funeral and rarely had occasion to wear since. His hands were clean but bore the permanent stains and calluses of manual labor, and he'd combed his graying hair back in an attempt to look presentable. He was expecting a man in an expensive suit, probably traveling with bodyguards or assistants, someone who would look as out of place in Manny's as Miguel would in a 5-star restaurant. Instead, James Ashford walked in alone. Miguel recognized him immediately, not from personal experience but from the business section of the newspaper and the occasional news story about real estate development in the city. Ashford was tall and lean, probably in his early 40s, with dark hair touched by gray and the kind of confidence that came from never having to wonder where next month's rent would come from. But what surprised Miguel was how normally he was dressed khakis, a simple sweater, no visible jewelry except a wedding ring. He looked around the coffee shop with curiosity rather than disdain, and when his eyes found Miguel, he approached with a smile. "Mr. Santos, I'm James Ashford." Miguel stood and shook his hand, noting the firm grip and direct eye contact. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for agreeing to meet." James slid into the opposite side of the booth. "And thank you for what you did last night. Victoria told me everything." Miguel shifted uncomfortably. "How is she, your wife?" "Shaken, but safe. The baby's fine. We had her checked out at the hospital just to be sure." James's expression darkened. "I should have been here. Should have insisted she not work late, especially—" He stopped himself. "Well, that's my responsibility, not yours." A waitress approached Dolores, who had been serving coffee at Manny's since before Miguel started coming. She looked curiously at James, clearly recognizing that he wasn't their usual clientele. "Coffee?" she asked. "Please," James said. "Black." "Same for me," Miguel added, though he'd already had 2 cups and his nerves were jangling. When Dolores left, James leaned forward. "Mr. Santos, I want you to know that what you did last night, putting yourself in danger for a complete stranger, that's not something most people would do. I think you might be surprised what people would do if they had to choose." James studied him. "Victoria said you moved like you had training. Military?" Miguel nodded. "Marines, 8th years. Combat? 2 tours in Afghanistan. Thank you for your service." The words were simple, sincere, free of the performative gratitude Miguel sometimes encountered. "What do you do now?" Miguel hesitated. There was no shame in honest work, but explaining that he cleaned toilets and emptied trash cans for the company this man owned felt like admitting failure. "I work maintenance at Meridian Tower, night shift." James's eyebrows rose slightly. "You work for me?" "Technically, I work for Allied Cleaning Services. They contract with your building management company." "But you're in my building every night?" Miguel nodded. James was quiet for a moment, processing this. "How long?" 3 years. And in 3 years, we've never met." It wasn't a question, and Miguel didn't answer it as one. "Different schedules. You probably leave before I arrive." Dolores returned with coffee, and both men paused the conversation until she was out of earshot. "Mr. Santos," James said finally, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." Miguel tensed. "Do you know why those men were targeting my wife?" The question caught Miguel off guard. "I assumed debt, like they said, though that didn't seem right." "Why didn't it seem right?" Miguel chose his words carefully. "Men like that, they're not debt collectors. They're specialists. Someone hired them to send a message, not collect money." James stared into his coffee cup. 3 weeks ago, I refused to sell a piece of property to some investors, waterfront development downtown. They made what they called their final offer, and when I turned it down, they said I'd regret it." "But you didn't think they meant—" "I thought they meant lawsuits, permit challenges, maybe some bad press. I didn't think they'd go after Victoria." James's jaw tightened. "I was naive." Miguel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the coffee. "Mr. Ashford, with respect, if these people are willing to target your pregnant wife, they're not going to stop because their first attempt failed." "I know." James met his eyes. "Which brings me to why I wanted to meet with you." Here it comes, Miguel thought. The polite thanks, the handshake, maybe a check to ease the rich man's conscience. "I want to offer you a job." Miguel blinked. "Sir?" "Head of security for Ashford Development. Full benefits, salary commensurate with your experience, company car, flexible schedule so you can be there for your daughter." The offer hung between them like something Miguel might accidentally break if he moved too quickly. "Mr. Ashford, I appreciate the gesture, but I'm not qualified for something like that. I'm a janitor, not a—" "You neutralized 3 armed men in about 15 seconds, James interrupted. "You assessed a threat, acted decisively, and probably saved 2 lives in the process. That's not luck. That's training and experience." Miguel shook his head. "That was just Reaction, muscle memory, a real security job, that's different. Background checks, credentials, insurance liability, all manageable. The question is whether you're interested. Miguel looked around Manny's at the cracked vinyl seats, the fluorescent lights, the handwritten menu board with prices that barely covered costs. He thought about the stack of bills on his kitchen table, about Sophia's future, about the eviction notice that gave him 2 weeks to come up with 3 months' rent. Why? He asked finally. Because Victoria and I are going to have a child in 3 months, and I need to know they're safe. Because I've built something worth protecting, and I need people I can trust to help me protect it. James paused. And because sometimes the best person for a job is the one who doesn't want it for the wrong reasons. Miguel was quiet for a long time. I'd need to think about it. Of course, but while you're thinking, consider this. So you've been invisible for 3 years, working nights, probably struggling to make ends meet, making sacrifices so your daughter can have what she needs. James leaned forward. What if you didn't have to be invisible anymore? What if you could provide for Sophia and still be the kind of man who steps in when people need help? The words hit Miguel like a physical blow. How did this stranger see so clearly what Miguel had been trying to hide? How do you know about my daughter? James had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I made some calls after Victoria told me what happened. I needed to know who I was dealing with. I know about Sophia, about your wife passing away, about your current financial situation. He held up a hand as Miguel started to object. Not to intrude, but to understand. You have every reason to keep your head down, avoid trouble, stay out of other people's problems. But you didn't. That tells me something about your character. Miguel felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with physical danger. Take your time, James continued. But don't take too long. Those investors I mentioned, they're not going to forget what happened last night, and next time, they might not send amateurs. He stood up and pulled out his wallet, leaving a 20 on the table for 2 cups of coffee. My card, he said, placing it next to the money. Call me when you've decided. Miguel watched him walk out, noting that James Ashford stopped to thank Dolores on his way out, that he held the door for an elderly man coming in, that he moved through the world with the easy confidence of someone who had never been invisible. Miguel picked up the card, simple, elegant, embossed. James Ashford, President and CEO, Ashford Development. Personal cell phone number handwritten on the back. Sophia would be getting out of school in 6 hours. Miguel would pick her up, help her with homework, make dinner, read to her before bed. The same routine they'd followed for 3 years, the careful choreography of a single father trying to hold everything together. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, Miguel would have a choice to make. A choice between remaining invisible and stepping into the light. A choice between the safety of poverty and the risk of hope. As he sat in the coffee shop that had become his refuge, Miguel Santos realized that everything was about to change. Miguel Santos sat on the fire escape outside his apartment at 3 in the morning, James Ashford's business card turning over and over in his calloused fingers. Below him, Riverside Heights slept fitfully. The occasional siren, the rumble of late-night buses, the distant hum of the city that never quite went quiet. Sophia was asleep inside, curled up with the stuffed elephant Maria had given her for her 5th birthday. In 6 hours, she'd wake up asking for pancakes and chattering about her upcoming science project on butterflies. In 7 hours, Miguel would walk her to school, kiss her forehead, and watch her disappear into the building where she spent her days, learning to read and dream and believe the world was full of possibilities. The eviction notice was still on the kitchen table, red ink marking the final deadline like a countdown to catastrophe. 72 hours to pay or pack. Miguel had run the numbers a dozen times. Even with the warehouse job, even if he picked up every available overtime shift, he couldn't make the rent. They'd have to move, probably to Carlos's couch until Miguel could scrape together first month's rent somewhere else. Sophia would have to change schools, leave her friends, start over in a new place where nobody knew she was the smartest kid in her class, or that she shared her lunch with anyone who forgot theirs. Unless... Miguel pulled out his phone and stared at the number James Ashford had written on the back of the card. One call could change everything. One conversation could lift them out of the poverty that clung to him like a shadow. Give Sophia the future Maria had dreamed of. Provide the security Miguel had been chasing for 3 years. But it would also mean stepping out of the safety of invisibility. It would mean trusting a world that had never shown him much kindness, believing in the generosity of a man whose wife he'd helped for all of 15 minutes. Miguel thought about the way James Ashford had looked at him in the coffee shop. Not with pity or condescension, but with something that might have been respect. The billionaire could have sent a check and a thank you note. Instead, he'd come to Riverside Heights, sat in a cracked vinyl booth, and offered Miguel a chance to be more than invisible. The phone felt heavy in his hands. At 3:17 a.m., Miguel Santos made the call that would change his life forever. 2 weeks later, Miguel stood in front of a full-length mirror in Men's Warehouse, adjusting a tie he'd never imagined wearing. The suit was charcoal gray, conservative but well cut, the kind of professional armor that announced competence and authority. The salesman had assured him it was appropriate for a corporate security position, and James Ashford had quietly arranged for the company to cover the expense. "You look like a secret agent, Papin," Sophia giggled from her chair in the fitting area. She was supposed to be in school, but Miguel had arranged for her to have the morning off. His first official day at Ashford Development was also his first day wearing a suit, and he wanted his daughter to see it. "I look like I'm playing dress-up," Miguel muttered, tugging at the collar. "You look professional," corrected Mrs. Chen, who had appointed herself Sophia's unofficial grandmother and Miguel's advisor on all matters requiring a woman's perspective. "That Mr. Ashford, he has good eye. He sees what you are inside." Miguel turned to look at himself from different angles, still not quite believing the reflection. 3 weeks ago, he'd been Miguel Santos, invisible janitor. Today, he was Miguel Santos, head of security for one of the city's most successful development companies. The job came with a salary that was more than double what he'd been making, health insurance that would cover Sophia's glasses and dental work, and an office on the 32nd floor of Meridian Tower, the same building where he'd spent 3 years emptying trash and mopping floors. "Mr. Santos," the salesman approached with a garment bag. "Your other suits will be ready for pickup Friday." Other suits. Miguel was still adjusting to the idea that he would need more than one. "What do you say, mija?" Miguel asked. "Sophia, think your old man looks ready for his new job?" Sophia studied him with the serious expression she wore when considering important matters. "I think Mama would be proud," she said finally. "She always said you were a hero, even when you didn't think so." Miguel's throat tightened. "What do you think she'd say about all this?" "She'd say, 'Don't forget where you come from,'" Sophia replied without hesitation. "And don't forget to be kind to people who are invisible, because you remember what that feels like." Out of the mouths of babes. Miguel changed back into his regular clothes, jeans and a flannel shirt that suddenly felt foreign after the sweet, and they drove to Ashford Development's headquarters. Sophia pressed her face to the window as they pulled into the executive parking garage. the same space where Miguel had confronted 3 armed men and changed the trajectory of his life. "It's so clean," Sophia marveled, "and shiny." "Different world up here," Miguel agreed. James Ashford met them in the lobby, looking relaxed in khakis and a button-down shirt. His wife Victoria stood beside him, her pregnancy now visibly advanced, but her smile warm and genuine. "You must be Sophia," Victoria said, kneeling carefully to Sophia's eye level. "I'm Mrs. Ashford. I've heard so much about you." Sophia, usually shy around strangers, seemed charmed by Victoria's attention. "Are you really going to have a baby?" "I am, in about 6 weeks." "Is it a boy or a girl?" Victoria glanced at her husband, sharing one of those wordless conversations married couples had. "It's a boy. We're going to name him David." "That's a good name," Sophia said approvingly. "David was brave. He fought the giant." "I hope our David will be brave too," James said. "Brave like your father." Miguel felt heat rise in his cheeks. "Mr. Ashford, James," the other man corrected. "We're going to be working closely together. I think first names are appropriate." Victoria stood carefully, one hand on her lower back. "Sophia, would you like to see where your dad's going to be working?" The elevator ride to the 32nd floor was surreal for Miguel. He'd cleaned this building for 3 years, but had never seen it from the perspective of someone who belonged here. The executive floors were all marble and mahogany, original artwork on the walls, floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the city that stretched to the horizon. "This is your office," James said, opening a door marked M. Santos, Director of Security. Miguel stared. The space was larger than his entire apartment, with a desk that looked like it belonged in a museum, leather chairs that probably cost more than his monthly rent, and windows that offered a view of the park where he'd taken Sophia to play on Sundays. "It's too much," Miguel said quietly. "It's what the position requires," James replied. "You'll be overseeing security for all our properties, coordinating with local law, enforcement, managing a team of 6 security professionals. The office needs to project authority." Sophia ran to the windows, pressing her hands against the glass. "Papa, you can see everything from up here. It's like being Superman." "Superman, huh?" Victoria smiled. "Yeah, I like that." Miguel walked slowly around the office, touching the desk, the bookshelf, the leather chair that would be his. "James, I have to ask, are you sure about this? I mean, really sure? Because if this doesn't work out, I can't go back to where I was." Sophia's already excited, already planning for the future. "If I mess this up..." James moved to stand beside him at the window. "Miguel, 3 weeks ago, 3 armed men cornered my pregnant wife in a parking garage. Without hesitation, you put yourself between them and her. You didn't know who she was, didn't know if I could reward you, didn't know if you'd even survive the encounter. You did it because it was the right thing to do." He paused, watching Sophia explore every corner of the office with boundless curiosity. "That's not something you can teach or train. That's character, and character is the most important qualification for this job." Victoria approached, moving carefully with the awkward grace of late pregnancy. "Miguel, can I tell you something? When those men had me cornered, I thought about my baby. I thought about James. I thought about all the things I'd never get to say or do. And then you appeared, and for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant when people talked about guardian angels." Miguel looked down at his hands, still calloused from years of manual labor, still stained from oil and cleaning chemicals that hadn't quite washed out. "I'm no angel, Mrs. Ashford." "Victoria," she corrected, "and you're wrong. Maybe you're not an angel, but you're something just as rare. You're a good man who acts on his convictions. That's exactly what we need." Miguel's first week as head of security passed in a blur of meetings, briefings, and crash courses in corporate protocol. He learned about threat assessments and emergency procedures, reviewed security footage from all of Ashford Development's properties, and met with his team, 6 experienced security professionals who ranged from cautiously optimistic to openly skeptical about their new boss. "No offense, Santos," said Danny Chen, the senior security officer, "but a week ago you were pushing a mop. Now you're supposed to tell us how to do our jobs." Miguel understood the resentment. These men and women had years of experience in corporate security, law enforcement backgrounds, advanced training. To them, Miguel was an outsider who'd gotten the job through luck rather than merit. "You're right," Miguel said during their first team meeting. "A week ago I was cleaning toilets. I don't have your training or your experience in corporate security, but I do have 8 years of military experience, 2 combat tours, and a very clear understanding of what real threats look like." He pulled up a photo on the conference room screen about surveillance footage from the parking garage incident. 3 weeks ago, professional criminals targeted Mrs. Ashford. They knew her schedule, her routine, her vehicle. They had weapons and a specific plan. This wasn't random. This was a coordinated attack designed to send a message to her husband. The room grew quieter as the implications sank in. "Now, I don't know about you, but I take that personally. This company, these people, they're under our protection, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let anyone hurt them on my watch." Miguel clicked to the next slide. Was a comprehensive security plan he'd spent the previous night developing. "Here's what we're going to do differently. First, we're going to treat every member of the Ashford family like they have a target on their back, because they do. Second, we're going to coordinate with local law enforcement to identify and monitor any potential threats. Third, we're going to train every employee in this company to recognize suspicious behavior and report it immediately." Danny leaned forward. "That's going to be expensive. A lot of overtime, additional equipment." "Mr. Ashford has approved whatever budget we need," Miguel replied. "He's more concerned about keeping his family safe than keeping costs down." Over the following days, Miguel threw himself into the job with the same intensity he'd once brought to military service. He studied building layouts, interviewed employees, reviewed vendor contracts, and identified dozens of potential security vulnerabilities that had been overlooked for years. He also discovered that being visible came with unexpected challenges. "Mr. Santos?" His assistant Jennifer knocked on his office door. "There's a reporter from the City Business Journal, online too. She's asking about your background, your qualifications for this position." Miguel felt his stomach tighten. "What kind of questions?" "She seems to know about your previous employment. She's asking about the circumstances of your promotion, whether there was a formal hiring process, if other candidates were considered." This was what Miguel had feared, the scrutiny that came with stepping out of the shadows. Some reporter had noticed that Ashford Development's new head of security had gone from janitor to executive in the span of 2 weeks, and now they smelled a story. "Tell her I'm not available for comment," Miguel said finally. "She said if you don't talk to her, she'll run the story anyway. Something about security concerns and questionable hiring practices." Miguel stared out his window at the city below, thinking about Sophia, about the new apartment they'd moved into last weekend, about the future that suddenly felt fragile again. "Get me James," he said. James appeared in Miguel's office 10 minutes later, took one look at his expression, and closed the door behind him. "What's wrong?" Miguel explained about the reporter, about the questions being asked, about the story that was apparently going to run whether he cooperated or not. "I should have seen this coming," Miguel said. "Of course people are going to ask questions. Janitor to executive in 2 weeks, it looks suspicious." James sat down across from Miguel's desk. "Are you having second thoughts?" "I'm worried about what this does to you, to the company. to Victoria and the baby. "Let me worry about the company," James said firmly. "And as for the reporter, we'll handle this the same way we handle every other business challenge, with facts and transparency. James, if this story makes you look bad—" "Miguel, stop." James leaned forward. "Do you know what I told the reporter when she called me an hour ago?" Miguel shook his head. "I told her that 3 weeks ago, a member of my security team, or my previous head of security, failed to prevent a serious threat to my wife and unborn child. I told her that you, working as a maintenance contractor in our building, neutralized that threat and potentially saved 2 lives. And I told her that promoting someone with your experience, your judgment, and your character wasn't questionable. It was the most obvious decision I'd ever made." Miguel felt something loosen in his chest. "I also told her," James continued, "that if she wants to write a story about questionable hiring practices, she might want to investigate companies that prioritize pedigree over performance, or that hire people based on who they know rather than what they can do." Miguel laughed despite his anxiety. "You said that?" "I said that, and more." James smiled. "Miguel, I didn't hire you to manage my reputation. I hired you to keep my family safe. Everything else is just noise." The story ran 3 days later, buried on page 6 of the business section under the headline, "From Janitor to Executive, Ashford Development's Unusual Promotion." It was more balanced than Miguel had expected, including quotes from James about Miguel's qualifications and military background, but it still made him uncomfortable to see his life examined in print. More concerning was what happened after the story published. "We've got a problem," Danny Chen announced, entering Miguel's office with a folder thick with documents. "Remember those investors who threatened Mr. Ashford? The ones behind the parking garage incident? I've been digging into them." Miguel gestured to the chair across from his desk. "What did you find?" "Blackstone Development Group. On paper, they're a legitimate real estate investment firm, but dig a little deeper and it gets interesting." Danny spread out photos and documents. The company's owned by a shell corporation, which is owned by another shell corporation, which eventually traces back to Anthony Marchetti. Miguel recognized the name from newspaper headlines. Anthony Marchetti was rumored to be connected to organized crime, though he'd never been convicted of anything more serious than tax evasion. "How sure are you about this connection?" "Sure enough that I think we need to take additional precautions," Danny replied. "These people don't give up easy, and after what happened in the parking garage, they might be looking for payback." Miguel studied the surveillance photo of men in expensive suits entering and leaving Blackstone's downtown office, license plates, meeting locations. "Have you shared this with James?" "Waiting for your call." Miguel picked up his phone and dialed James's extension. "Can you come down to my office? We need to talk." When James saw the spread of documents on Miguel's desk, his expression grew grim. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that I'm recommending we move your family to a secure location until this blows over," Miguel said. James shook his head immediately. "Victoria's due in 3 weeks. She's not going to want to leave her doctor, her hospital, everything she's planned for the birth." "Then we need to make sure she doesn't have to," Miguel replied. "But James, these people don't play games. The parking garage was a warning. Next time they might not send amateurs." Danny leaned forward. "I've been thinking about this and I have an idea. What if we let them make the next move, but we're ready for it?" Miguel turned to him. "Meaning?" "We set up surveillance on their known locations, coordinate with local law enforcement to monitor their communications, and make sure we know about any move they make before they make it." James considered this. "That sounds like we're walking into a trap." "No," Miguel said slowly, understanding Danny's thinking. "That sounds like we're setting one." If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. While Miguel planned security operations and coordinated with law enforcement, his relationship with James and Victoria deepened beyond the professional. It started small for James insisting that Miguel join him for lunch, Victoria asking about Sophia's progress in school, invitations to family dinners that gradually became routine. Miguel had expected to maintain the careful distance between employer and employee, but the Ashfords seemed determined to blur those lines. "How's Sophia adjusting to the new apartment?" Victoria asked one evening as the three of them reviewed security plans for the baby's nursery. "She loves it," Miguel admitted. "Her own room, a real kitchen, windows that actually open. She keeps saying it's like living in a palace." James smiled. "What about you? Still getting used to the change?" Miguel was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, sometimes I wake up afraid I'm going to mess this up, that I'll make some mistake and everything will go back to the way it was." "Miguel," Victoria said gently, "do you know what James told me after he met you at that coffee shop?" Miguel shook his head. "He said you reminded him of his father, not in appearance but in character. James's dad built this company from nothing, never forgot where he came from, never stopped caring about the people who worked for him." James nodded. "He would have liked you. He always said the measure of a man isn't how he treats people who can help him, but how he treats people who can't." "Your father sounds like a good man." "He was. He also would have told you that success without purpose is just noise. You have purpose, Miguel. You know what matters." Miguel thought about Sophia, about the photo of Maria on his kitchen table, about the promise he'd made to always protect the people who needed protection. "Can I ask you something?" Miguel said. "Why didn't you just hire a security firm? Someone with a corporate reputation, references, insurance coverage. Why take a chance on someone like me?" James and Victoria exchanged one of their wordless conversations, the kind married couples developed over years of shared understanding. "Can I tell you about our first date?" Victoria asked. Miguel nodded, curious where this was heading. "James took me to dinner at Le Bernardin. Incredibly expensive, impossible to get a reservation, the kind of place you go to impress someone." Victoria smiled at the memory. "Halfway through the meal, we heard shouting from the kitchen. Turns out one of the line cooks had burned himself badly, but the restaurant wasn't going to call an ambulance because they didn't want the disruption." James picked up the story. Victoria got up, marched into the kitchen, and demanded they get that man medical attention immediately. When they refused, she called 911 herself. "I spent our first date in a hospital emergency room, making sure a stranger got proper treatment for his burns," Victoria continued. "Most men would have been embarrassed, annoyed, maybe never called again." "What did you do?" Miguel asked James. "I knew I was going to marry her," James replied simply, "because I realized I'd found someone who understood that how we treat people when it's inconvenient, that's who we really are." Victoria reached across the table and took Miguel's hand. 3 weeks ago, you could have walked past that parking garage, could have called security and waited for them to handle it, could have stayed invisible and safe, but you didn't. You stepped up when someone needed help, even though it put you at risk. That's who you are," James added, "and that's exactly who we want protecting our family." Miguel felt something shift inside his chest, a warmth he hadn't experienced since Maria died. For 3 years, he'd carried the weight of being alone, of being responsible for Sophia's entire world, of being the only person who truly cared about her welfare. But sitting in this office, planning for the safety of people who had welcomed him into their lives, Miguel realized he wasn't alone anymore. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" Victoria asked. For seeing something in me that I'd forgotten was there. 2 days later, the storm broke. Miguel was reviewing security footage from their downtown property when his phone rang. Danny's name on the caller ID. Miguel, we've got movement. 3 black SUVs just left Blackstone's office. They're heading toward Meridian Tower. Miguel was already reaching for his jacket. How many people? Looks like 6, maybe 8, all armed based on the way they're carrying themselves. Miguel's training kicked in, adrenaline sharpening his focus. Where are James and Victoria? James is in his office on 42. Mrs. Ashford left about an hour ago for a doctor's appointment, but she's not answering her phone. Miguel felt ice form in his stomach. Find her, now, and get me building security on the line. He sprinted for the elevator, his mind racing through scenarios and contingencies. The smart move would be to call the police, let law enforcement handle whatever was coming. But Miguel had learned in Afghanistan that sometimes you didn't have time for the smart move. Sometimes you had to make the choice between being careful and being decisive. Building security, this is Rodriguez. Rodriguez, this is Santos. We have a potential security threat approaching the building. I need you to lock down all entrances except the main lobby, and I need armed security at every access point. Yes, sir. What kind of threat? The kind that doesn't negotiate. Miguel reached the 42nd floor and found James's office. His boss looked up from his desk, immediately reading the tension in Miguel's posture. What's happening? The people who threatened you, they're here, and we can't locate Victoria. James went pale. What do you mean you can't locate her? She's not answering her phone. We're checking with her doctor's office, but... Miguel's phone buzzed. Danny, tell me you found her. Miguel, you need to get down here, now. Miguel's blood turned to ice. Where? Parking garage, level B2. Miguel looked at James, saw his own fear reflected in the other man's eyes. Stay here, Miguel ordered. Lock the door. Don't come out until I call you. Miguel, if something's happened to Victoria, then I'll fix it, Miguel promised. But I need you safe so I can focus on finding her. Miguel ran for the stairs, taking them 3 at a time, his heart hammering against his ribs. In his mind, he could see Victoria as she'd been that morning, eye glowing with pregnancy, excited about the nursery they were finishing, looking forward to meeting her son in just a few weeks. If something happened to her, if he failed to protect her. Miguel burst through the stairwell door into the parking garage and saw Danny standing next to Victoria's car. The driver's door was open, her purse scattered on the ground, her phone lying next to the front tire with its screen cracked. But no Victoria. How long? Miguel asked, his voice deadly calm. Based on the security footage, maybe 10 minutes. 3 men, same guys from before. They were waiting for her. Miguel knelt next to the car, studying the scene with the methodical focus he'd learned in the military. No blood, which was good. Signs of struggle, but not violent struggle. They'd surprised her, overwhelmed her quickly. Do we have them on camera leaving the garage? Danny nodded grimly. Black SUV, tinted windows, they're long gone. Miguel stood up, his mind already shifting into combat mode. Danny, I need you to coordinate with the police. Give them everything. Ashford, the surveillance footage, the files on Blackstone, the whole timeline. And I need you to make sure James stays safe. What are you going to do? Miguel walked toward his car, his steps purposeful, his expression grim. I'm going to get her back. Miguel, wait! You can't just... Miguel turned back, and Danny saw something in his eyes that made him step backward. It was the look of a man who had fought in wars, who had lost people he loved, who understood that sometimes the only way to stop evil was to meet it with overwhelming force. Danny, 3 weeks ago I was a janitor, invisible, powerless. I couldn't protect my wife from cancer, couldn't give my daughter the life she deserved, couldn't do anything except clean up other people's messes. He opened his car door, his voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. But I'm not invisible anymore, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let them take someone else I care about. As Miguel drove out of the parking garage, his phone rang. Unknown number. Santos. Mr. Santos, my name is Vincent Marchetti. I believe we have something that belongs to you. Miguel's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Where is she? Safe, for now, but that depends entirely on your cooperation. What do you want? Simple. Mr. Ashford withdraws his bid on the waterfront property, sells it to us for exactly $1, and forgets this whole unpleasant business ever happened. And if he doesn't, then Mrs. Ashford has a very unfortunate accident. And that baby she's carrying, well, let's just say these things are unpredictable. Miguel felt rage surge through him, hot and pure. If you hurt her, you'll what, Mr. Santos? You're a security guard, not a soldier anymore. You have 2 hours to convince Mr. Ashford to see reason. We'll be in touch. The line went dead. Miguel stared at his phone for a long moment, then called the one person he trusted to help him do what needed to be done. Carlos, it's Miguel. I need a favor, and I need you to not ask any questions. Carlos Santos had been Miguel's younger brother for 38 years, which meant he'd learned to recognize the tone of voice that said Miguel was about to do something dangerous and probably stupid. What kind of favor? Carlos asked, though he was already reaching for his car keys. The kind where you don't ask questions and you bring your toolbox. Carlos understood. The toolbox contained items that weren't exactly tools, are items left over from Carlos's less respectable younger years, before he'd gotten married and found steady work as a mechanic. Items that Miguel had never asked about, but had always known were there. Where? Miguel gave him an address on the industrial side of town, near the old warehouse district where legitimate businesses gave way to shadowy enterprises that preferred privacy to foot traffic. Miguel, whatever you're planning, 20 minutes, Carlos, and bring the van. Miguel hung up and called James. Did you find her? James's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. Working on it. James, I need you to listen to me very carefully. In about an hour, you're going to get a phone call demanding that you sell the waterfront property for $1. You're going to refuse. Miguel, if they hurt Victoria, they won't hurt her if they think they can still get what they want. But the moment you give in, she becomes a liability instead of an asset. Trust me on this. What are you going to do? Miguel was already driving toward the warehouse district, his mind running through tactical scenarios, remembering lessons learned in a different kind of war on different streets. I'm going to remind some people why it's a bad idea to threaten Marines. The warehouse sat on 3 acres of cracked asphalt, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. During business hours, it served as a distribution center for a plumbing supply company. After dark, it became something else entirely. Miguel parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, moving through the shadows with the patience he'd learned during night patrols in Afghanistan. Carlos was positioned on the opposite side of the building, monitoring radio frequencies and providing overwatch. 3 guards patrolled the perimeter, sloppy, bored, more concerned with looking intimidating than maintaining actual security. Miguel counted at least 6 vehicles in the parking area, which meant between 8 and 12 people inside. Not great odds, but Miguel had faced worse. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number, a photo of Victoria tied to a chair in what looked like an office. She appeared unharmed but frightened, one hand protectively covering her belly. Below the photo, 1 hour, Mr. Santos, then we discuss terms. Miguel studied the building's layout, identifying entry points, escape routes, potential choke points, where a small number of defenders could hold off a larger force. The main entrance was heavily watched, but there was a loading dock on the east side that offered better concealment. "Carlos, you in position?" "Yeah. I count 3 guys doing lazy circles around the building. Amateur hour." "Good. On my signal, I need you to create a distraction on the north side. Nothing too dramatic, maybe trip the motion sensors, make some noise." "What about you?" "I'm going to walk through the front door." Miguel circled back to his car and changed clothes, trading his corporate security outfit for dark jeans, boots, and a jacket that concealed the tactical vest Carlos had provided. He checked his equipment one final time, then started walking toward the warehouse. Sometimes the best way to infiltrate a place was to look like you belonged there. Miguel approached the main entrance with the confident stride of someone who had every right to be there. The guard at the door, a heavy-set man in an ill-fitting suite, looked up from his phone. "Help you?" "Vincent's expecting me," Miguel said casually. "Miguel Santos." The guard's eyes widened slightly in recognition. "You're supposed to call first." "Change of plans. The boss wants to discuss terms face to face." Miguel kept walking, forcing the guard to make a quick decision. Stop him physically or call for instructions. The guard chose the phone, which gave Miguel the opening he needed. Miguel was through the door and into the warehouse before the guard finished dialing. The interior of the warehouse had been converted into a maze of offices and meeting rooms, all constructed from prefabricated panels that offered privacy but little structural integrity. Miguel moved through the space like smoke, using the poor lighting and narrow corridors to his advantage. He found Victoria in the third office he checked, tied to a chair behind a desk where a thin man in an expensive suit was counting money from a briefcase. 2 guards flanked the door, both armed, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Miguel studied the scene through a gap in the wall panels, calculating angles and distances. Victoria appeared unharmed but exhausted, her face pale with stress and fatigue. The baby was due in 3 weeks. This level of trauma couldn't be good for either of them. Time to end this. Miguel's phone buzzed. "Carlos. Motion sensors just went off on the north side. Half the guys are heading that way to check it out." "Perfect. Give me 30 seconds, then call in the cavalry." Miguel had already dialed 911 and left the line open in his pocket, ensuring that police would have his location. But he couldn't wait for them to arrive. Not with Victoria's life hanging in the balance. Miguel took a deep breath, centered himself the way his Marine instructors had taught him, and stepped around the corner. "Gentlemen," he said conversationally, "I think you have something that belongs to me." The 2 guards spun toward him, hands moving toward weapons, but Miguel was already in motion. 8 years of military training and 3 weeks of rage made him faster than they expected, more precise than they were prepared for. The first guard went down from a strike to the throat that left him gasping on the floor. The second managed to clear his weapon before Miguel's knee connected with his solar plexus, folding him in half. The thin man behind the desk tried to reach for something in the briefcase, but found himself staring down the barrel of his own guard's gun. "Vincent Marchetti, I presume?" Miguel asked, though he kept the weapon trained on the man's center mass. "You have no idea what you've walked into, Santos. This is bigger than you, bigger than your boss, bigger than a—" "Right now it's very simple," Miguel interrupted. "You're going to untie Mrs. Ashford. You're going to walk out of here, and you're going to forget you ever heard the name Ashford." Marchetti laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "And why would I do that?" Miguel tilted his head toward the sound of approaching sirens. "Because in about 3 minutes this place is going to be crawling with federal agents. Seems someone tipped off the FBI about your money laundering operation." Marchetti's face went white. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Miguel smiled coldly. "Danny Chen, my security officer, used to work for the Bureau. Funny how old contacts come in handy." The sirens were getting closer. Miguel moved to Victoria's chair and began untying her restraints, keeping the gun trained on Marchetti. "How are you feeling, Victoria?" "Like I never want to see the inside of a warehouse again," she replied, her voice shakier than she probably wanted it to be. "But the baby's okay, still moving around." "Good. We're going to get you to a hospital as soon as we're out of here." Marchetti stood up slowly, his hands visible, his expression shifting from anger to calculation. "This isn't over, Santos. You think you've won something, but all you've done is paint a target on everyone you care about." Miguel helped Victoria to her feet, supporting her weight as she steadied herself. "Vincent, let me tell you something about targets. I've been shot at by people a lot scarier than you, in places a lot more dangerous than this. You want to threaten me? Get in line." The warehouse door burst open, and federal agents poured in, with the coordination of a well-rehearsed operation. Miguel recognized the tactical gear, the precise movements, the way they cleared rooms and secured suspects. "FBI, everyone on the ground!" Miguel carefully placed the weapon on the desk and raised his hands, Victoria beside him doing the same. "Miguel Santos, Ashford Development Security. The woman is Victoria Ashford, kidnapping victim. The man at the desk is Vincent Marchetti." Special Agent Sarah Martinez approached, her weapon lowered but ready. Miguel recognized her from the briefings Danny had arranged. "Mr. Santos, Mrs. Ashford, are either of you injured?" "We're okay," Miguel replied. "But Mrs. Ashford needs medical attention. She's pregnant. Paramedics are standing by outside." Martinez nodded toward the door. "We'll need statements from both of you, but that can wait." As they walked toward the exit, Victoria stumbled slightly and Miguel caught her arm. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for coming after me, for not waiting for negotiations or ransom demands or whatever the smart play was supposed to be." Miguel helped her into the ambulance, where paramedics immediately began checking her vital signs and monitoring the baby's heartbeat. "Victoria," Miguel said, "your family. Family doesn't negotiate with terrorists." 24 hours later, Miguel sat in Victoria's hospital room, watching James pace nervously while Victoria held their newborn son. David James Ashford had decided not to wait for his due date, arriving 6 hours after his mother's rescue. 3 weeks early, but healthy and loud and absolutely perfect. Victoria had gone into labor in the ambulance, whether from stress or simply because babies arrive on their own schedule. "He's beautiful," Miguel said, looking down at the tiny face peeking out from the hospital blanket. "He's got his mother's timing," James replied, finally sitting down in the chair beside the bed. "Couldn't wait for a normal, boring delivery room experience." Victoria shifted carefully, still exhausted from the ordeal and the rapid delivery. "Miguel, I want you to know. David's middle name is going to be Miguel, David Miguel Ashford." Miguel felt his throat tighten. "Victoria, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," she said firmly. "This baby is alive because of you. I'm alive because of you. Our family exists because you decided to step out of the shadows and be the person we needed." James nodded. "Miguel, I've been thinking about something, about what happens next." Miguel tensed. After the adrenaline and the crisis and the dramatic rescue, was this the moment when reality reasserted itself? When the billionaire remembered that his head of security was really just a janitor who'd gotten lucky? "I want to offer you something," James continued. "Partnership." Miguel blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" 25% equity in Ashford Development, full partnership, equal say in all major decisions, your name on the building. Miguel stared at him. "James, I can't accept that. I work for you, not with you." "No," James said quietly. "You saved my family. You risked everything to protect people you'd known for less than a month. You proved that character matters more than credentials, that courage matters more than connections." Victoria reached over and took Miguel's hand. "Miguel, what James is trying to say is that we want you to be family, not just an employee, not just a friend, our family." Miguel looked down at the baby sleeping peacefully in Victoria's arms, thought about Sophia at school, probably telling everyone about her dad's exciting new job, thought about the photo of Maria on his kitchen table and the promise he'd made to always protect the people who needed protection. "I need to ask you something," Miguel said finally. "What about the people I left behind? The night janitors, the maintenance crews, the people who are invisible? What about them?" James and Victoria exchanged one of their wordless conversations. "What do you have in mind?" James asked. Miguel smiled. "I want to start a program. Employee advancement, education assistance, career development for everyone who works in our buildings. Not just the executives, not just the people with college degrees. Everyone." "That's going to be expensive," James pointed out. "I know, but it's the right thing to do." Victoria laughed softly. "See, this is why we want you as a partner. Most people would have asked for a bigger office or a company car. You want to help other people climb out of the shadows." Miguel thought about it for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, but I have conditions." "Name them." "First, Sophia gets a college fund. Full ride, whatever school she wants to attend." "Done." "Second, I want to hire Danny Chen as our new director of investigations. The man used to work for the FBI. We'd be crazy not to put those skills to use." "Also done." Miguel paused, struggling with the third condition. "And I want a memorial scholarship in Maria's name for single parents who want to go back to school." James stood up and extended his hand. "Miguel Santos, partner, welcome to the family business." As they shook hands, baby David opened his eyes and looked directly at Miguel, that intense, unfocused stare newborns had, as if they were seeing things the rest of the world couldn't. "Hey there, little man," Miguel said softly. "Don't worry. Your family's going to take good care of you." 3 months later, Miguel stood in front of the renovated community center in Riverside Heights, watching Sophia cut the ribbon for the grand opening of the Miguel Santos Community Development Center. The building offered everything from GED classes to job training programs, from childcare to financial counseling, all free to anyone who needed help climbing out of poverty. "Nervous?" James asked, standing beside him. "Terrified," Miguel admitted. "What if this doesn't work? What if people don't come, or the programs fail, or, "Miguel," Victoria interrupted, bouncing baby David gently as he fussed in her arms. "Look around." Miguel looked. The parking lot was full. People streamed through the doors. Single mothers with children, elderly residents who wanted to learn computer skills, teenagers looking for after-school programs, immigrants seeking English classes, the invisible people of the city finally having a place where they could be seen. "You did this," James said quietly. "You took your second chance and turned it into second chances for hundreds of other people." Sophia ran up to them, practically glowing with excitement. "Papa, Mrs. Rodriguez says she's going to learn to be a nurse, and Mr. Chen is going to teach computer classes, and there's a whole room just for kids to do homework." Miguel knelt down to Sophia's level. "What do you think, mija? Think this was a good idea?" "I think Mama would be proud," Sophia said seriously. "She always said you were a hero. Now everyone can see it." That evening, the Santos Ashford family, or as they'd come to think of themselves, gathered for dinner at Miguel's apartment. It was still modest compared to James and Victoria's home, but it was comfortable now, filled with laughter and the chaos that came with a newborn and an 8-year-old. "Miguel," Victoria said as they cleaned up after dinner, "I have something for you." She handed him a small wrapped package. Inside was a photo in a simple frame. Miguel in his marine dress blues, standing next to Maria on their wedding day. But this wasn't the faded, worn copy that had sat on his kitchen table for 3 years. This was a restoration, professionally cleaned and reprinted, the colors bright and clear, both their faces glowing with young love and infinite possibility. "Where did you get this?" "Sophia gave me the original. She said you looked at it every morning, but you never smiled when you saw it. She thought maybe if it looked happier, you would too." Miguel stared at the photo, seeing Maria's face as he remembered it, vibrant, alive, full of dreams for their future together. "She would have loved all of this," he said quietly. "The job, the partnership, Sophia's future secured. But mostly she would have loved knowing that we found family again." James raised his glass of wine. "To family, the kind you're born with and the kind you choose." "To family," they echoed. As they toasted, baby David chose that moment to let out a perfectly timed cry, making everyone laugh. "And to babies who know how to steal the spotlight," Victoria added, standing to tend to her son. Miguel watched James help Victoria with the baby, watched Sophia carefully arrange her new art supplies on the kitchen table, watched the people who had become his family create the life he'd never dared to hope for. 3 months ago, he'd been invisible, a man pushing a mop through empty hallways, counting down the days until eviction, wondering how he'd ever give his daughter the future she deserved. Tonight, he was exactly where he belonged. The Santos Ashford Foundation had opened community centers in 3 additional neighborhoods. Miguel's employee advancement program had helped 47 people move from service jobs to management positions. Sophia was thriving in her new school, already talking about becoming a doctor like the ones who had helped baby David when he was born early. And on a warm October evening, exactly 1 year after his promotion from janitor to partner, Miguel Santos stood in his office on the 32nd floor of Meridian Tower, looking out at the city lights spread below him like earthbound stars. His reflection in the window showed a man who no longer needed to be invisible. Success suited him, not the expensive clothes or the corporate title, but the confidence that came from knowing his life had purpose. Behind him, family photos covered his desk. Sophia at her science fair, James and Victoria at baby David's baptism, the whole extended family at the community center's first anniversary celebration. But in the center, in the place of honor, sat the restored photo of him and Maria, young and hopeful and in love. Miguel's phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Dad, I helped Mrs. Chen with her English homework tonight. She's going to pass her citizenship test. Love you." Miguel smiled and typed back, "Proud of you, mija. Love you too." As he prepared to leave for the day, Miguel made one final check of the building's security systems. Old habits died hard, and some responsibilities never went away. He was still the guardian, still the protector, still the man who stepped forward when others needed help. The only difference was that now he wasn't invisible. Now he was exactly who he'd always been meant to be. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.